Have you ever hit a moment where success wasn't enough? Where the weight of your past, the scars no one sees, or the doubts you don't dare to voice keep you from breaking through to the life you know you're capable? Maybe you've achieved things others only dream of. Maybe deep down, there's still something holding you back, something you can't quite name, yet it's there, shadowing your every step forward. If that strikes you at a chord, take a breath. You have just found your people. You're not alone. Welcome to That Shit Does Not Define You, Stories of Hope. I'm Athena Captain, joined by my co-host, Jada Haycraft, and this isn't just another podcast. This is a space to strip away labels, shame, and the invisible barriers that have held you back.
With each podcast, we will bring you raw, unfiltered stories of resilience, real people who have defied the odds to rewrite their narratives and give you the strategies, systems, and tools to do the same. This isn't theory, it's lived experience. It's practical, it's powerful, and it's personal. Whether you're ready to claw your way out of rock bottom or shatter the invisible ceiling standing between you and your highest potential, this podcast is your roadmap to rise. Your next breakthrough starts here. Let's get started. It's time to rewrite your narrative.
Have you ever felt like something's holding you back, but you can't quite put your finger on it? You've done the work, you've achieved success, but deep down, you know there's more. So why does it feel like you're stuck? Why are you spinning your wheels? Today, we're going to dig into the invisible barriers that are holding you back and uncovering the truth about what's stopping you from breaking through to your full potential. I'm excited you found this podcast because you have just found a community of people just like you who are ready to break through. Welcome, Jada.
Welcome. Yes. Welcome to the first episode of our new podcast. We're so excited. Well, Athena, you know, I always have to have some facts and figures before we get into the mushy gush, right?
Well, science is important because it's important to understand how the psychology works so that we understand that there is some science going on behind the behavior. I think more than ever, this is really important for understand. So tell us a little bit of science behind what we're talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely. So over 70% of high achievers struggle with feeling that stuck feeling that you were describing despite their success. They also feel unresolved experiences from our past can silently shape up to 90% of our decisions without us even realizing it, which is a significant amount. And so just wanted to go into that a little bit more in depth today, but I thought that that was important. And then lastly, science shows that our beliefs, many of them formed in childhood, create invisible barriers that can hold us back for decades. So going into that a little bit, today we're going to be talking about the ACE scale. And for those who don't know, I do want to define the ACE scale is the Adverse Childhood Experience Scale. It measures the impact of traumatic events experienced during childhood, ages 0 to 17. It includes 10 questions that assess exposure to abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction, such as parental separation, substance abuse, or mental illness. A higher ACE score, so 4 or more, is linked to an increased risk of negative outcomes in physical, such as heart disease, cancer, that sort of thing, mental health, depression, anxiety, that sort of thing, and behavior. So substance abuse would be an example of that.
Yeah.
Despite its predictive value, though, the ACE score is not determinant of one's future. Many individuals with high ACE scores go on to thrive, often by using resilience building strategies that we're going to talk about on this podcast. And interesting enough that we are talking about the ACE scale today, because I actually, Athena, I know you know this, but I want our audience to know this as well. But I have my bachelor's in human development and family science with a concentration in child and family services. So throughout my time at Oklahoma State University, I studied ACE pretty in depth through multiple courses. And so this is something I have on my heart because it's something that I've experienced myself, but also I have studied throughout college. And so have a little bit more background information on that. And Athena, I know you have your own personal story with the ACE scale. So I would love for you to share that with our audience before we dive in today.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here. And one of the big reasons why it was on my heart, and it's been on my heart for decades, to do a podcast to help other people like me. And I'm going to go into really what that means. But what's really important is that people who have high ACE scores, that we don't feel like we're alone. And even though those statistics are true, that we can defy those statistics. And so I wanted to start this first episode, Jada, with being really transparent and raw with our audience about who I am and why this entire podcast is what it is. Now, some of you may be listening like, where'd you get the name of this podcast? And I got to tell you, it's because, as you know, by the way, you don't even have to have a high ACE score to be labeled with shame and names. And unfortunately, adolescent children can be really harsh. And so in adolescence, oftentimes we're told, you name the thing, you're too skinny, you're too fat, you're not smart enough, you're the R word, whatever it may be. We then I look at them like sticky notes, Jada, on us, right? And then we carry them like somehow they're part of our identity. So if you're wondering, and if you're looking at the graphics of this podcast, Jada and I wanted you to see, we get that you have all these post-it notes of labels on you, and we want you through every series we do to start pulling those off. Like, let's take these off and let's realize who we were created to be, who we are authentically, and that you have the possibility to no longer function out of the labels you've been given. And so that's my heart. I know that's Jada's heart, and it's why we wanted to do this. And all of the speakers that we're going to have are going to say the same thing. So I want to say that, since this is the first one, so you understand. But I'm going to start with my own story. So I'm just going to cut to the chase. I am a 10 out of 10 on the ACE score, which means if you take the ACE link, it means that I have lived through some atrocity. Matter of fact, the way I sum it up, because I don't like to glorify the pain, how I like to explain it to people, and this is true, if you can imagine the abuse, I have lived through it. And my severe abuse started at 5 and lasted consistently till 14. That's not where all of it stopped, but that's where the majority of the extreme happened. Now, that means I have endured physical abuse, obviously sexual abuse, abandonment, neglect, all types of things. And when that happens to you as a child, you start to question your value. You start to question if life is worth living, honestly. And you don't understand life. You don't understand why life is so difficult. I remember at 5 years old, I learned how horrible and cruel and evil life could be. And from that moment forward, my innocence was gone. Interesting enough, I know, Jada, we will eventually write my book, and I have been collecting pictures. And I have a picture of me before I was 5, and you see this joyful little kid. And you see a picture after 5 that I don't look like the same human being. And so in a visual picture, you see the difference because it changes you. So anyone listening, if you have endured atrocities, you know exactly what I mean. So a lot of people ask me, what was the hardest thing? And I'm just going to talk from my heart. A lot of people want to get really wrapped up into this sexual abuse. And yes, that's atrocious and horrible and life altering, and I couldn't condemn it more. However, for me personally, it was rejection. It was this feeling that no one wanted me, no one valued me, no one thought I was worth protecting. That feeling of worthlessness, lack of value, Jada, has stuck with me. I'm 51 years old now. That has been something I have had to fight my entire life. My entire life. And if you look at my life, I have psychologists that will say, for the amount of abuse and the level of abuse, for the length of abuse that I went through, that I should not have functioning relationships. I should not be able to be honest, I shouldn't have empathy. I should have borderline personality disorder. I should have detachment disorder. I should be an addict. I should be incarcerated. All of these things. Fun, right? That sounds lovely. Let's all sign up for that. No. Um, but I'm not. And so I have psychologists that say, you defy science. Now, let me say this for those of you who are listening. If you're wondering, like, well, how did you do it? Number one thing, my faith. And this podcast is not a religious, but I have to be transparent with you. My faith. I came to my faith, and I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus Christ. I came to know him in my life around the age 9, 10 on my own. And when I was 10 years old, I was writing in a journal. I know I'm a nerd, Jada. Who at 10 writes
You
in a
mean it wasn't a
journal?
diary? Dear
It was a
diary?
diary. I had a diary. Okay, you know what's even more nerdy? Side note, y'all. This is true. I used to take my grandma's Reader's Digest and pull out the favorite quote, and I had another spiral binder of written favorite quotes at 9 and 10. You might be a nerd, right? Okay, I'm just saying. So, but it,
Surprisingly, that does not shock me.
I know, right? I also had a briefcase in high school. So, hello, you guys. I'm a little bit of a nerd. However, at 10 years old, and I still have this journal, which is interesting that I still have it, but I had written in the journal at 10 that I was going to end my life because I was tired. I do not remember what happened, but I do know it had to do with my faith, because several days later, the entry in the journal was that I said to my faith, my God, if you will use all of this pain to help other people, I will continue to fight. That one stance, that one belief that he was going to get me through it, sustained me through many more years of extreme abuse and an adult life that has not been a piece of cake. And so for me, my faith is foundational to the success and the ability to overcome those statistics. And you know, it's I will say this, it didn't mean I didn't need therapy, because that was the other component, right? I went to therapy. I knew in my 20s, I was really struggling, had had a nervous breakdown, was starting to make some really bad life choices. If you are listening right now and you do have a high ACE score, you make bad choices sometimes. And I have done that. I have done things that I'm ashamed of, embarrassed of, etc. And I know that they were a product of how I viewed myself and the environment I came from. Not that it excuse me, Jade, it doesn't excuse me from the behaviors. I always say there's storms that life happens to you, and there's storms you create. Now, the storms I create maybe were fueled by the past, but I still got to own them. I think that's critical for people listening about the ACE score here. We got to own our behavior no matter what's driving it. Okay. So it doesn't, I had all this abuse, and I could make all kinds of excuses, right? But that doesn't benefit you. It keeps you in victim mode. So the number one is my faith. Number two is I sought help. I knew that it was bigger than me, and I got help. And third, I chose not to be a victim. I chose not to allow the abusers to win. So if you're listening to this, and no matter what level of trauma that you have had, we've got to believe in something bigger than ourselves. I know AA talks about that too. Whatever your higher be, you've got to believe in something bigger than yourself. You've got to get help to unpack it. And then three, you have got to understand and make a decision that you're not going to continue to be the victim. I remember in my 20s, Jada, a therapist saying, I was angry. I was still so angry. And, that's legit. And my therapist said, I got to tell you, your abusers aren't thinking about you.
Mm.
They're not thinking about you. So every time you're thinking about them and rehashing and giving them energy, they win.
Mm.
And that stuck with me. And I was like, well, they're not going to win. No way. You know what I mean? They already took my innocence. They took my childhood. They already took enough. Heck no, they're not taking any more. So I have worked really hard in my life to overcome these statistics. And I still, if you are watching on YouTube, and if you're not, I have struggled with my weight for decades. And by the way, that's one of the symptoms, Jada, of the
Mm-hmm.
ACE score. It's either you have an irregular balance with food. You either are anorexic, bulimic, or having eating disorder in that regard, or you overeat. Both of them, by the way, if you're listening, are based in control. Right? Because as a child, I had no control. So interesting, when I overeat, it means I get to control something. I get to control how much I eat, right? I deserve it. Well, that's not a positive behavior. So, or you have the opposite, right? I get to control what I eat, and I'm not going to eat very much. So we will be unpacking through all of these episodes and podcasts, all the different ways, and we'll unpack and get through this. But this is why we're doing this. I want you to know that the people in this podcast, Jada someday will tell her own story. We understand. This is not something we read in a book. This is not something that, although we've read books about it, this is something that we've lived. It's something we've lived through. It's something that we've lived and walked with our friends through, men and women. This is something near and dear to our hearts, because we want you to know you're not alone. There is hope. There are services to help you. And that no matter what your ACE score is, that shit does not define you. I'm just saying. So, boom, right? Well, I know. And everybody's like, don't cuss, you're a Christian. I know.
Whatever.
But I do want to kind of really wrap this up for a second here and give you some truths. One of the things that Jada and I want to do, in this podcast, we're going to give you some science. We're going to give you either stories we tell or interviews. There'll be more interviews. And then we want to give you some truths, some factual things. And then we're going to wrap it up with some rubber meets the road, some practical things. So here's uncovering the truth. Number one, why we get stuck. Sometimes the biggest barrier in life aren't the ones we see. They're the ones we've learned to ignore. So think about this. Unresolved past trauma or experiences could be stopping you. Internalizing social expectations and labels. Hello. Fear of failure or fear of success. And patterns of self-doubt and imposter syndrome. These things can be happening behind the scenes, stopping you. That's a truth. Okay. Another truth, we must identify the barriers. We have to walk through this powerful reflection exercise. So I hope you're liking and subscribing so you can come back if you're on your treadmill in your car. But these are 3 things I want you to ask yourself. Ask and think about this. What area in my life do I feel stuck? Right? What area in my life do I feel stuck? What's the story telling me about why I can't move forward? Ask yourself, what is the story? What's that negative belief, that wiring that tells you that you have to be stuck? And then ask yourself, is that story true? And who gave it to you? Who gave you that story? That is power. Those 3 questions are extremely powerful, and I suggest you do that. But Jada, that's just the beginning, right? I mean, that's part of it. One of the things so those are some truths to think about and a little bit of work. But one of the things we also want to make sure that we do in this podcast, and we're going to call it the rubber meets the road, And this is where we give you action steps in order for you to actually make progress. We don't want to just be talking about it. We want you to have hope. And action and behaviors create that hope. So I want you to do this for me. So this is a journal prompt for you. Okay. If you don't journal, go for a walk, ponder this. What is holding me back? What are the things that have happened to me that are holding me back? What are the things that have been said about me that are holding me back? And what is the first step I can do? So you're going to acknowledge it. And then what's the first step I can do to no longer buy into it? What's your first step you can do to no longer buy into it? How can you take control of it? And number two, take baby steps, meaningful action today. Have those hard conversations, sit with a friend. And this is something, find somebody that you can trust and say, in this particular area in my life, I'm stuck. And I think I'm stuck because of this. And I don't want to be stuck. I don't want to stay in a victim mentality. Help me figure out the first step. Seek a therapist if you need to. But let's identify them and let's come up with baby steps. You guys are worth the effort, and your life is worth the effort, and we do not want the abusers ever to win, right?
Right.
What do you got to say about all that, girl? Woo!
Man, this was just such a good episode. And honestly, I just want to encourage anyone that does have that head trash, or what we like to call that monkey on your shoulder,
Mm-hmm.
to muzzle it, man. We have a podcast all about muzzling your monkey. So I'll make sure that that is linked in the show notes, because I think that that's a great place for people to go next. And then aside from that, if you enjoyed this podcast, we would love for you to like and subscribe so you can continue to join us week after week. But we also want to encourage you to share this with someone that you know may be going through the same thing. And honestly, you can find us just about anywhere. So aside from, liking, subscribing, listening to the other Muzzle the Monkey episode, we just really want to encourage you to find us on all the other streaming platforms. You can find us on social media streaming platforms. Just, search Athena Captain on Google. You'll probably find us. And if you don't, you know where else to find us. You can find us right here every week.
Excellent. Hey, we want to leave you with one thing, and this is like your marching internal, and that is, this is not your practice life. So don't wait for perfection. Start messy, start scared, just start, because nothing changes until you do. Take one step today forward. The life you want, dare to share it with us. We'll be here with you, standing with you every step of the way. We're your tribe. We're your people. We're here for you.
And you're worth it.
Yes.
See ya.